Hello everyone, today we're going to be continuing our testing. This is going to be quite a few tests we're going to be doing across the next couple episodes, but then hopefully we'll be able to move on from the CRUD stuff. For those of you that are curious, we'll probably end up doing like some active storage stuff after this, just because that's a frequently requested topic. If you're interested, there are some videos on the channel that have covered like active storage API uploads before. Of course, there's also like doorkeeper stuff for user authentication if that's something you're into, but we'll like gradually move through some of this stuff. But today we're going to go ahead and we're going to deal with the new post form test, I guess, for this video, and then we'll move over to some of the other tests. And the goal is to hopefully finish our test coverage by the time we're done. So let's say test new post form component. Test, please. And then what we're actually going to be doing here is we're going to be writing tests for our new post form, our post edit form. We're going to do our tests for our post service. Then we're probably going to refactor the post edit and the post form to only use a singular form component. And then we'll test that form component as well. And the reason why we're testing these first is so we can ensure the functionality still works. Then we'll extract it to a separate component, and then we can still run our tests for these two once we're done. So that's like the overall goal that we're doing right now. But let's go ahead and let's create a branch for this. Click create branch, same stuff we've been doing. Right click to fetch this. And now we should be good to go. So we can do a npm run coverage real quick, just to make sure that we're testing or that we still have our full coverage here, because we don't have like continuous integration yet. But let's go ahead and let's do this. So we're gonna do a, let's do this. Let's move this over because we're actually not looking at the browser at all in these. So we can do something like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click on our post, new file, and we'll say new, what was it, post form.test.jsx, something like that. And then we can start with our new post form. Now, once again, we're going to have to import a bunch of stuff. You can usually find this in your other test files if you want to. So like our fire event and our screen, we're going to need those. So we'll paste these in, but I don't think we need the render here, and we don't need the wait for. So we're just going to need these two. Then we're going to need the browser router, which we can also grab from somewhere. We need to import our post form. And then we need a act. We'll be using that. So that's coming from our test utils. And then we can import our create post service if we're so inclined. So these are like our standard imports. And then these are like custom stuff we made, right? So we need all of that, but we'll get to what that actually means in a minute here. Now we kind of need to mock up our post service again, so we can do that real quick. This is of course something we've done enough times at this point, so I think we're probably safe to just leave it like this and say, you know, we're just going to mock it. We don't need to explain how this works. Just.fn, something like that. Now for this just function, we are eventually gonna need to return a ID, title, and body, because we're going to be redirecting to the ID, so we probably want to do something like that. But we can also refactor for that if we're so inclined. So for now, we'll just do this, and then we'll see if we actually need to do that. So let's describe our test. We need to describe a new post form test. And then after each of the tests, we can just go ahead and clear our mocks just to make sure that we're cleaning up after ourselves. Then we can do our first test. And this test will be something like, I don't know, it needs to render the new post form, and it needs to allow typing, and then we can do our arrow function and like this, and then like this. All right, so for this test, we need to render our new post form, which means we can just create a quick little render block. Now we should have render being imported somewhere, which should be coming from up here. We'll import render from our testing library React. And then this is just upset because we need to do something like an expect, so that it stops that error. So I'm just going to leave this expect here so it stops the squiggly line, underline stuff, because it drives me nuts. And then now we need to render this and actually check if we can do stuff and type in here. So let's go ahead and let's grab our title input and our body input by calling screen.get by label text. And our text is going to be title colon and body colon. Now we can come into our new post form. We can just check if we have those. We can see right here, title colon, body colon. So those will work. Just make sure if you ever run into an error, it's probably because you don't have the actual text in the label. So that's just something to watch out for. And then for our submit button, we can do something like this, where our submit button is a get by role button with a name of create post. And if we come in here, we can see create post is right here. So that should also work. So now we have our inputs and our buttons, right? So let's go ahead and let's say something like, let's set the title input to have a target value of test post. So we're using fire event, and then we'll do the same thing for the body input with the target value of this as a test post. So we know what we're now expecting. We're expecting the title input to have a value to be equal to test post. And you can actually do something a little bit better here. You could say like expected title is equal to, and then put in test post, and then you can do expected body is equal to this, and then you can get rid of these values and just paste these in instead, which will let you do something like the expected value is the expected value, and then you can just expect both of those to be there. And then you can also, you know, do a expect submit button, what is it, to be in the document. I really don't like the naming convention here. Now, my issue with this is technically we're testing like 3 different things here. So if something fails, we don't really know what failed. So in that case, you could probably just like refactor this to, I don't know, only do like the title, for example. So you could do something like this. And then this would technically be one test, and then you could leave the rest of these commented out. But it's a YouTube video, so I think we're fine to do some things improperly. And then just leave the rest up to your imagination. You can always refactor this if you are so inclined. So now let's see if we can submit the form and redirect to the post page. Now, once again, we're going to be doing our rendering, which should be a warning sign that we have, you know, this many renders here. Because, you know, as soon as you do something twice, you should be thinking to yourself, I probably need to refactor this soon. You don't need to immediately refactor it. But generally the rule of thumb is like if you do it twice, you're okay. But if you do it 3 times, you probably want to abstract it so you have something a bit more usable. So, okay, let's say we have this. Let's come down here. Let's do a title input. Let's do a body input, and let's grab the submit button again. And then we can do something like a await act async. And then in here, we can do our fire changes. Now, I don't think we actually need to await these. So we can actually do these fire events before our act. We can then do our submit button click. And then after we do that, let's tab back over. We can hit enter. We can then go ahead and close this. And we can come down here and we can say expect create post to have been called 1 time, something like that. Because as soon as we hit submit here with this redirect, this should, in theory, fire the create post up here, which should have that counter that tells us how many times this has been called. So let's go ahead and let's run these tests. Let's do an npm run test. Now this will run all of our tests. We can, of course, if we have the extension enabled, run the tests in here instead. And we're actually running into an error with our new post form. Cannot read properties undefined of ID. So let's come into our new post form real quick and let's change how this works. I think right now it's grabbing the ID from the response.id, which means our choice is either we can change this to redirect to the root path, or we have to change how this is returning data. I think we should change how the test works and not necessarily how the component works in this case. So let's go ahead and let's do that. Instead of doing a just function, we're going to do a arrow function in here. And then we can say this should return an ID of 1, a test, and whatever. And now if we go ahead and we run this npm run test, we can see that all of our tests are now passing. So now we get this ID back, which means our new post form gets an ID back from the response, which is of course coming from the service, right? If we come into our post service, we have our create right here, which does the thing where it goes out to the Rails API, creates the post, gets back a post as some JSON. And then in here, it would reasonably get back the post ID, and then we can call response.id to get that ID out of it. Because we're mocking it here, we're just pretending that our service has returned a post with an ID, and then we can just call response.id off of this. So that's how we're now passing this test. So that's pretty cool. That seems to be working. Let's go ahead and let's move on to the next one, because right now our npm run coverage for this is probably not great. So we can see right here we're missing line 19, and if we come over to our new post form, line 19 is going to be this this error right here. So failed to create post. So let's go ahead and let's say we need to handle when post creation fails. Seems like it makes sense to me. So let's come in here and let's say something like create post dot mock rejected value, just like we've been doing, and then we can say new error and whatever error we want to put in here for now. We'll just leave it like that. Let's then come down here, and this is where we can do what we did before, where we can do something like a const console spy equals a jest.spy on console. And then we can say console.spy.mock implementation, and then we can do a jest.fn in here. And then we can come in here, we can do our render again. Now this is the third time we've done this render, so we probably want to do something a little bit better. So let's go ahead and let's grab this render right here. And at the top, we can do something like, I don't know, let's do const render form is equal to something like this. And then we can call render form instead of what we've been doing. So we can just say render form. And then we can do a, let's actually just copy this line. We can copy it to here. And then we can copy it to here as well. Something like that. And then after we render this form, we can then once again do what we've been doing. We grab our title, our body, and our submit button. We can then set the title. We can set the body. And then after we do that, hopefully this will close, we can then do our await async act. We can click on the submit button. We can then, after we've submitted this, expect the console spy to have been called one time. But we actually don't want to do this console spy to have been called with one time. We want to say to have been called with something like failed to create post with our new error, failed to create post, I think. But we do also have to close this act so that we can get rid of these errors. There we go. Okay, so that should work. Let's go ahead and let's run this and let's see how many things we broke by doing that. If our tests are good, it looks like our tests are good. We have 100% coverage now, which is very nice to see. So let's go ahead and let's do a git status real quick to see what we changed. We only changed the test, the new post form, which is good, which means we should be good to go ahead and do a git add dot git commit -m, or we can just say git commit and say, I don't know, test complete coverage for new post form. We tested the thing, right? Go ahead and do that. We can do a git push this up, and then we can move this down, and we can come over to our repo. Let me just hit F11, I guess, come over to code. That should give us our familiar pull request thingy. We can go ahead and, create the pull request. We can check, make sure only one file was changed. All that other good stuff looks good to me. And then we can come back to our conversation. You could attach like a screenshot if you want to of your code coverage or whatever now. Just the usual cringe stuff that I've been showing you how to do, which is probably going to upset a bunch of people. But, it depends on your workflow at some companies. I've literally worked at. This is the workflow. You just take a picture of your tests. So we'll go ahead. We'll just merge this PR. And we're good to go. So now let's go ahead and let's move on to editing the post form in the next video. So for now, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully I'll see you in the next one.